All right, so today we got my 81 Trans Am up on the lift, and we're gonna actually something I've been wanting to do is change out the rear leaf springs. Now, my car was not originally sold or equipped with WS6 suspension package from the factory. This car was actually a regular base Trans Am that had the J65 RPO code checked off for rear disc brakes, and of course the turbo engine and everything like that, but it was not a WS6 car. Originally my car had 7-inch snowflakes on it from the factory, so somebody had switched it out for 1980 8-inch wide turbo wheels. But anyway, so why the leaf springs? Well, I put WS6 front coil springs in the car when I had done the control arms. The control arm bushings were really bad when I first got the car. I had some control arms that had newer bushings in them, so I swapped them out, and I had a set of low mileage WS6 front springs that I installed to convert the front of the car to WS6. So in the rear, I had planned on doing the rear leaf springs, and I had a friend of mine who drag races his 69 Nova that had some Summit Racing rear leaf springs in his car, and he had recently converted over to some Caltrac monoleafs and was just basically giving away the leafs. So he gave me his leaf springs from his Nova, and I'm going to swap them out. The other thing is my car seems to lean to the left a little bit. I think the left side leaf spring, something's wrong. So that was the other reason why I wanted to switch it out. Now I'm going to point out some other things about these leafs, because the Nova did have Caltrac traction bars on it, which there was a difference. It has a solid aluminum bushing in the front eyelet of the leaf spring. I'm going to show you that in a second. And then what modifications I'm going to do when installing them. So let's take a look at the leaf springs. All right, so here's the leaf springs that I got. Like I said, these were from Summit Racing, but he had switched out the front eyelet to this solid bushing for his Caltrac bars, and he didn't need them because his monoleafs from Caltrac already had the bushing in it. So I called up Caltrac, and they sent me the bushing for it to put the bolt in there. Now the car itself, I'll show you in a second. There's these washers that go on it and everything. There's a spring pocket that bolts to this, and then that spring pocket bolts up to the body, and I'll show you that. I don't plan on running Caltrac traction bars on this. In fact, I'm trying to not have to use any kind of traction bar that hangs down under the car. And I've got some other things that I'm going to be doing later to maybe try to help with that. But let's take a look at the car real quick. So the car itself, one of the things that we're looking at doing, so here's the spring pocket right here. So all the F bodies have this. There's 3 bolts holding the spring pocket to the body. There's 1, 2, 3. And that you have to unbolt from the body because you can't get at the bolt up in there to take out of the bushing. So you have to actually remove the leaf spring with that pocket on there. Then you can remove the pocket. One of the other things that people do is they'll actually take that spring pocket, and they'll do, some people call it the Herb Adams modification. Herb Adams was the guy that worked at Pontiac Engineering, and later went out on his own with VSE to, he kind of developed the WS6 suspension package. Well, one of the things that he done to gain mainly more handling was to actually take that spring pocket and re-drill the hole for the leaf spring bolt, for the eyelet bolt, 3/4 of an inch up into the spring pocket, and that kind of changes the anti-squat, I guess they were calling it, from the research that I had done. Supposed to improve the handling a little bit, possibly improve the traction. It will slightly lower the car, because my fear is that these leaf springs might be raising the car up a little bit. But I do want to make that modification to the spring pocket, because I could always go back if I don't like it or if something's not right. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take off the old leaf springs and start transferring some of the stuff over. I think I'm going to end up, I know they're not in the best shape, but this is a Texas car. We're going to see what the condition is of these bushings. And I do have a new energy suspension bushing kit, but I got a feeling it might not be right for this, so we're going to take a look. But we're going to get the old ones off, get the old shackles out, and got to undo the spring pad underneath, the shock, all that stuff. So let's get to taking that off. We'll do some comparison then. All right, so we got the old leaf spring off, and this is the spring pocket that I'm talking about right here. This is what bolts up to the body in the front. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this bracket. We're going to re-drill this hole up 3/4 of an inch. It will require that we cut a window in here for the eyelet of the spring to poke out, mainly just kind of flush with the top, I guess, maybe up a little bit, but it won't interfere with the floor of the car. And then the other thing that I'm looking to do, apparently the stack up of the thickness of the springs is, well, maybe it is the right. Looking at this one, I'll have to take a measurement, but it seemed like there was not enough thickness here for the to take up this gap between where the spring sits in the axle channel and then where the plate bolts on. That thickness there, you got to have enough in there. So he actually used, there was another plate down here that he used to get that thickness, and he used it on his monoleafs. What I'm thinking of doing is actually taking the factory spring and taking it apart and possibly using probably either this main leaf and cut it down, like cut it behind this pin so I can bolt it on, and then using a majority of it, but not up to the eyelet, cut it down and attaching it to the top of this one. Let's see if I can rotate this. Attaching it to the top front half of this spring to basically kind of act like a traction bar, give it more stiffness in the front, because usually what happens is what they call axle wrap up. So what ends up happening is that under acceleration, this spring is trying to form into an S. It's mounted up there, and due to the rotation of the axle under hard acceleration, and basically the ring gear, the pinion gear is trying to climb the ring gear, so that the drive shaft's trying to rise. And in the process, it's bolted here, and it's actually twisting the spring. So it's putting a bow down here, and it's going up here. Now, usually what a traction bar will do is a slapper style bar, or even a Caltrack. Well, I shouldn't say Caltrack. Caltrack's different. Slapper bars would usually try to put a snubber up here and try to keep this part of the spring straight. Caltracks actually have a pivot point at the front there, and actually put using the rotational force of trying to wrap the spring is actually it has a lever arm that comes and pushes down on top of the spring, so it's counteracting that wrap up, that S bend in it. I was just going to try to stiffen it on the top to get my thickness, number one, but to also stiffen on top and in the front of the axle and try to act as a traction bar that way. But first I'm going to double check all my dimensions and make sure I see if I do need that extra stack up height. But first I'm going to take off the bracket here. I might just test fit this leaf spring first. Let's see what we got. Okay, so there was a little bit of a change in plan after kind of setting everything up. The solid bushings in the front weren't going to work out. I didn't have enough shims for it, so I was installing this shackle kit and leaf spring bushing kit from Energy Suspension, or urethane bushings. So I went and decided to put those in instead. So I knocked out the solid bushings that were in there and used these polyurethanes. So it's going to get polyurethane front and rear with new shackles. I've already got the driver's side one on, just showing the modification, the Herb Adams modification here to drill the hole up higher by 3/4 of an inch. And then obviously we had to kind of cut that out to clearance for the bushing and the eyelet of the spring, and then we're going to bolt that back up. So on the driver's side, we already have it in, no problem. Clearance wise, it does clear the floor. with no issues. The great part about having a Texas car is that everything unbolts. Nothing was broken or needed heat, which is awesome. I love that. So one of the other things we did with the leaf spring is that we were talking about the stack up in here. Well, I took the short little leaf from the original spring pack and added it to the top. I'll get the shock out of the way there. But added it to the top to kind of create my shim. And there's a little bit of a gap here, which is better than no gap and having play in here. So we've got that all tightened up. Now we're just gonna get the other side on. Get this leaf spring on here with all the new bushings. Oh yeah, the new shackles. This is the new shackles that come with the energy suspension kit. Ignore the fact that it hits my tailpipe because the car's not on the ground yet. And of course, we're going to tighten everything up once it's on the ground. You know, we don't tighten bushings with the suspension in the full droop. But so yeah, let's get this buttoned up here and get it on, see how it sits. This is technically, this little modification is supposed to lower it a little bit. I didn't know if adding that extra leaf there is going to lower it at all, maybe just a little bit, because it would raise the axle up higher on the leaf. But I got a feeling it's going to sit too high in the back anyway, because there is quite a bit more arc in these springs than in the stock ones. But then again, maybe the stock ones were having an issue. But we'll see what it is once it's on the ground. All right, got it all back on the ground, all settled in, tightened up with it on the ground. Actually, it doesn't look bad. It doesn't look bad. It doesn't seem to look like it's leaning anymore, but the passenger side wheel opening on the rear looks a little bit higher. Oh my gosh, the sun. It looks a little bit higher, but overall I'm pleased with it for what it was. I did find a part number on the leaf spring. It's an older Summit number. It was a 708 GM. They also had a GM-2, which was a 2-inch lowering spring. This is not the lowering spring. I think it's discontinued now. It got superseded by another number, it looks like. I'm happy with it. Hopefully there's no wheel hop or anything at the drag strip when we do a launch. But we'll have to find that out sooner rather than later. But thanks for watching, guys, and we'll catch you next time.